So, any questions, please? Yes, sorry, one down there. Thank you.
Both Tim and John, you both touched on these massive data sets. And I remember, John, you said there's going to be a very low bar to entry. But in my experience, large sets of data that have been collected by somebody are either private or are very expensive to get access to. Now, obviously, there is an example of where the government has been a little bit insightful, which is where they released the land registry LiDAR data, which is now being used all across the construction industry for all sorts of things that it was never originally intended for, but only because it's free. How does this all fit together? Because I don't, we've clearly got a government which is generally not predisposed to releasing data to the public, which we've already paid for with our taxes. Is that going to change, and that's what will mean that the bar is set very low? Or
so I think from my perspective, there are a couple of things about the setting low of the bar. A big part of that is about the infinite computing aspect of it. So it's the cost of being able to use computing power is going to come down and down and down. In terms of access to big data, there was a great example from Paul about huge data sets being readily available on a cost per use basis. So I mean that was a great example of how this starts to happen, and the more vendors we can see, and maybe you'd like to say a bit more about that.
Glad you reminded me of that, because what you were describing sounded, and I'm sure this is an unfair depiction of what you were describing, a little bit like that situation where you go on holiday and leave the data on your phone, and then you get back home and you've got a bill for £3,000 because of all the, and browsing around maps, and I mean it's amazing, but it in a sense of it, for it to really work, the cost has just got to come way down.
Yeah, no, that is a hugely unfair description of what I'm talking about. Well, there's 2 points here. One, in terms of browsing and looking, you're not spending any money until you're actually taking it out, and it's all up front. And there's many ways when you're gathering data, you can go through and actually control those costs yourself. And in 99 out of 100 times, or even more than that, it's still cheaper than having a subscription up front, which a lot of people are still demanding for you on the data. On the licensing side, you talk about, the one point I probably didn't put across actually is the people who are producing the data, they're now licensing it from a project point of view. So it's not individual pieces of licensing. You take that bit of data, and that's now licensed for your project. So for building A, you can use that data and you can share it with everybody else. So the quantity surveyor, the architect, whoever's using it can use that data. So in there is a cost saving. If there's a collaborative team effort, then there's a collaborative cost potentially to having that, which would save you some cost.
I think that there are two issues here to me. One is the accessibility of data, and in a large number of currently commercial organisations, they don't really know whether data is valuable or not, so they don't allow access at all. And the other one is the cost of access to data once it's deemed to be accessible. I think, the only thing I think I can really add to that is that there is a general trend in society that data should be more open and available, and that data, there's an expectation, particularly amongst the younger generation, I won't say millennial, I'll just have, that data should be free, right? Now, I counter that against certainly in the infrastructure position we are in the UK, where a substantial amount of our infrastructure is actually owned by organisations based outside the UK. So I think over the next few years we're going to see a tension in this area, but inevitably I think within maybe 5 to 10 years, I can see no problem with having cheap access.
I think it's going to change.
Yes.
Which is
I mean, you look what happened to London once TfLs, after TfL started making their real-time information available for external use. It's allowed, the TfL, the owners of the data, if you like, have benefited so much by getting increased numbers of people through their services because of the increased understanding of real-time timetabling, scheduling, whatever, and disruptions.
Sort of cultural catch-up in the same way as...
I mean, the thing is, it's always worth checking for everyone in the room to Google open source data, because that list is being added to all the time. All the time. The other thing, I will just temper that, and I suppose you would say that I'm slightly biased. You do get what you pay for at times with that. And the other thing I would temper slightly with the, I hear what you're saying about cost, and I think there's a fine balance, because there is a lot of work goes into producing that data to ensure, one, it's reliable, one, it's accurate, and two, it's meeting the requirements you want, which I see at the back end at Landmark all the time.
I'm not suggesting that all data should be free,
No.
but I think things have got to
Merge.
merge and
Yeah,
move
agree.
from where we are.
Yeah, I mean, just as I was suggesting earlier when I spoke, that we don't understand the value of the value case on level 3 BIM. Probably don't understand it properly on level 2, but so I don't think we understand the value of data and information.
No.
And data itself has no value. It's the knowledge that you get from using it, munging it, that is the case.
Because I did a building data exchange hackathon a couple of months ago, and it was amazing. I mean, when you're given access to these data sets, the stuff you can think of to try and just to experiment with. And there are experiments that you would never do if you had to pay, because most of them just come up with rubbish answers. Anyway, sorry.
Can I ask two?
Go on then.
First
To
one,
what?
Merv, with the racetrack diagram, when you talked about it then, you had employee decision points at 1, 2, 3 and 6. Presumably, if you didn't want to ask a question at 3, you could remove one, and if you wanted one at 4 and 5, you could add one.
Yeah, that's why you had the standard is really just a generic. The DPOW was actually put together to overcome a problem, and that is when we first researched this, there are 40 different, in excess of 40 different plans of work. And of all those people, the worst one really, to some extent, was the fact that everybody used the RIBA stages, which were actually wrapped around what the RIBA did. And we really needed to have information delivered at different stages, not what we do at the moment. So MEPs was at the old RIBA stages, E, F and G, and we really needed that information at D. So the idea of the DPOW was to allow the client to specify when he wanted information to be delivered, in an attempt to align the delivery phases of the different people in the supply chain. So whilst we've got that up there for the moment as guidance, the DPOW for each project will define how many drops there are and what information should be delivered at each of those drops. If you look at the GSL document, for instance, it does say there are other drops of information at 4 and 5, but they're not totally requested. That's just information that flows through towards the gate at 6, but delivered continuously, not at the end of the project. So the DPOW will govern how many drops and what needs to be delivered.
Okay. Then the second one was on the model production delivery table. You said that it's the responsibility of the client to fill it in. Earlier on, we heard issues on education and the ability of the client to actually know what they're doing as part of the process, and the informed client being a rare thing.
Yeah.
So how likely is it that a client is able to actually complete that form sufficiently, and would they actually have to appoint the project information manager first to help them with it to actually get it achieved?
Well, this is all about procurement. If the client does not think that he has a team that's sufficiently capable of writing that, I hope he is sufficiently knowledgeable to understand how he would procure somebody to do it. And so there is that thing there that says the employer's representative. Yeah, that could be somebody sitting within his own organisation or own office, or it could be somebody he procures to help deliver that. As indeed we used to have project managers delivering many years ago. But it's somebody, whatever you do, they have to be competent to carry out the work at that stage. So, yeah, it may be the client or it may be the client's representative, somebody they employ to do that.
Sorry, just to carry on that, because many of the EIRs that people, the contractors are getting of such low quality, what we're finding is many of the main contractors are developing their own data requirements in. So, for instance, we saw earlier from LJ, which was a pretty good one, but that doesn't happen very often. So what's your views and takes of Skanska, for instance, I talked about earlier, who've developed their own minimum data requirements that they will push on to people unless a good EIR turns up that says something different or additional to what they've already said?
Let's be careful about what's a good EIR from the client. The client is requesting something. So the first tier contractor, let's say it's a Skanska, will have to take that proposal apart and understand it fully as to how they're going to deliver it and what information they need to deliver. They, in turn, will write their EIRs to procure the team that's going to answer the questions that the clients possibly put together. I'm going to be really silly here, but it may be that the client doesn't know anything. And it may be he comes up with a simple question, a PLQ, which says, I want you to deliver to me the most modern, forward-thinking, IT intelligent hospital ever built and managed. Nobody knows what that is. So they will procure a supply chain that are innovative, will learn, invent this thing, design it, develop it, etc. And only those people will know what information needs to be handed over at the end of the day to maintain it, for instance. So the only question the client may be asking is, how much is it going to cost me? Is it within my CapEx requirement?
So in other words, what you're saying is right then that they should be looking at.
Sorry?
In other words, what you're saying, it's correct that then that they should be looking at this themselves because they will be putting that down the supply chain
Well,
to give value to their clients.
certainly in all the training we do here, we actually do point that out, that the client EIR is one request for information, which then has to be taken apart and actually recompiled as to how many people do I need to answer these questions. I can't answer them all. Therefore, I have to write my own EIR. I will receive a BEP from them. But when I roll them all up together, then I will deliver the answers to the questions to the client at that point. Yeah. And sorry, just to finish off, it is quite amusing that a lot of the contractors and indeed designers have said to us, well, we don't get an EIR from the client. Well, surely these people have been writing EIRs that may not have been called that for years in procuring their supply chain. So it's an activity that's there. We just put a name to it. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Nick just pulled a face there. Yeah. Well, we know this is, and he's absolutely right. The problem has been, and why we're bringing it to the fore, is that they're supposed to do it. They should have been doing it. But in general, our industry hasn't been doing what they should have been done years ago. Hence that point about the baby boomers. I was interested in that because I was a baby boomer, but I think most of the people of my age have already retired. So might have been late with the baby boomer, certainly the beginning of it. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Okay, no, it's get the industry to do what they know they should be doing.
Just an update on the document. The rumors about part 6 of that, which is taking consideration of CDM. That part of the development.
Sorry, part 6. Sorry, health and safety. There's lots of rumours out there. I did hesitate when I said the documents that are out there at the moment. I mean, there are a number of other subject matters that we really would like to consider, but not at the moment. One is health and safety, or one more about health than safety. Perhaps we're already there with safety. We need to have a look at health. But there are other things out there we could look at, which is tolerances. One of the problems we have is that people build 3D models. They're solid, aren't they? They don't move. They are fixed, represented in that state. Whereas buildings actually move around, and in putting this information together, we sometimes forget that buildings move around. And what we don't want to do is to instigate a whole new writing of a load of tolerance documents, which are already out there. We just want people to remember that these buildings move around and to understand what those tolerances are, and particularly when we're building the construction record model. I emphasise that because it's not the as-built, it's the construction record. What did we actually do? We will have to put some means in there that says if it's within 200 mil of where I've specified it, that's acceptable for the foundation, let's say, but if it's 25 mil away for something else, then that's not acceptable and you have to remodel. So it's not something we want to start a whole conversation on at the moment or write another standard because there's plenty out there. But there will be in PAS 2, there will be a reference to tolerances, for instance, to say, understand what the tolerances are and how they could be used. So who knows, there may be another 10 documents out that we don't know.
Sorry, George Stevenson from Active Plan. Just to build on what Nick was saying there, Mervyn, I think it's extremely unwise for any contractor to actually start a project without having defined a proper
EIR. Yep.
that includes the OIR and the AIR. And if that means that they have to work with the client to actually get that defined, that I think is absolutely critical, because if you start the project without that being agreed, the client hasn't really defined what they want.
No.
And that's going to lead to problems. So if they don't have the skills to do it, then I think it's up to either the employer's representative or indeed the contractor who's got the experience perhaps to actually help them achieve that output specification.
I would agree with you. I mean, that's why that 0 to 1 stage brief is all about that. How do we define the brief before we move on to do anything else? Because if we haven't got a brief, where do we go?
Yeah, that 8536 I think is an excellent document.
Indeed.
Helping steer that.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Joe.
Take a final question from the back there. Thank you. That's you? Yes.
What are the plans to audit the level 2 standards, the project standard? It's all well and good saying these are the standards, these are the processes that everybody has to adhere to, but how do you actually say that is the level 2 defined project?
Well, you go to the BRE who will help you to qualify whether you are at BIM level 2 by adopting and seeing what your processes are. This is nothing more, in a way, to your pre-qualification activity anyway in the first place. It's just that we have a definition of the pre-qualification we need for BIM level 2. So do you understand the documents? Are you implementing it? Have you put it in place, etc.? And then you can get people to verify or qualify what you're doing and get a certificate in that way.
That's all well and good in saying I understand it, I can follow it, that sort of thing. How do you then prove at the end that I have followed it?
You're audited continuously. Show me.
I think there's a discrepancy there in the kind of question being asked. I think one is, how do you know someone can do the level 2 requirements, which case the business scheme is a way to do that. I'm happy to plug and talk about that afterwards. But I think the question kind of is, how do you know that you've finished the project to level 2, regardless of if you've got a business scheme or something else, in terms of what makes the project level 2? Is it, for example, if you've submitted a fully fancy end of stage Kobe and done it all at each stage, is it having the EIR? What is the minimum tick list that makes a project level 2, I think is the question.
Okay. Well, the process is defined in BS 1192-207. Let's start there. Is a series of processes to enable you to produce better quality information. PAS 2 is about how do you procure it and deliver it, and then you have all of the other supporting documentation. Not forgetting that within those 8 documents, we call it that for the moment, there are lots of references to other standards, etc. But what you're trying to do is to have your business understanding what those processes and methodologies are and putting them in place. Yeah. How do you know that you've completed your project? I won't even call it BIM level 2 for the moment. Is what is the acceptance criteria at gate 6 anyway? Because that will define whether you've actually done the thing correctly in the first place. How much cost did you incur? Did you actually get rid of error? Did you actually manage the thing properly? Maybe other questions that are asked at gate 6. But the first one will be defining it before you're actually procured. That's at the real point. Can you do it? Are you competent to do it? And all the way through the standards, it talks about competence. You must be competent to do that particular task. And that's a company as well as anything else.
Off the back of that, my final point that would be, what happens if you don't adhere to that? So from the government point of view, you've asked for a level 2 project, MOD, just one of the sectors there, but what happens if you just tailored back to a traditional?
Yeah.
What is in place to actually say you have done BIM level 2?
Well, yeah, Terry could.
Put in place now.
Please.
It's project level, so they're just being developed and rolled out on projects within the departments I spoke about. It's project level KPIs or project level maturity measures. And they're all about things that you were saying there about did it have an EIR, did it cover the elements that you wanted, and actually did at the end of the project we get what we thought we were going to get or what we asked for at the front. So there's a number of measures for each stage of the project that pins it back against the PAS number 2. So that's the way we're going. And then, so for every project, a department will have a sort of maturity ranking, if you like, and then we use those to sort of roll up on a quarterly report in terms of departmental organisational maturity.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm actually going to draw it to a close. And I'm not going to attempt to summarise today. I can see you all breathe a huge sigh of relief. What I will say, though, is we have had a lot of presentations, a lot of content, excellent presentations. And I hope all of you have found some things today that you found really helpful, informative, and are going to help us take this journey forwards. I do hope all of you will be coming back tomorrow, or at least some of you will be coming back tomorrow. If you can't, we do have some feedback forms, and I would ask you to fill those out, please, because we do listen to your feedback and we do try to improve. If your feedback's about the chairman, I regret that you have got the same chairman for tomorrow, unlike referees where you get a different one for each game, but I'll just try harder tomorrow. But thank you all very much again, and can we just close by thanking our speakers for today?